Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you can join us again. Today is part two of the D1 academic requirements for eligibility certification for high school student athletes. On the first part one, just to recap a little bit, we talked about what eligibility means, a little bit about what the NCAA is and who's involved in that, our core course timeline, and what a core course is, basically. Today, I want to step on the other side a little bit and talk about how we find the classes in our particular school that meets these requirements. And if you recall, the goal for student athletes is to be a full qualifier, right? And we're talking about Division One now, right? So to be a full qualifier, we have to meet these certain requirements. And those requirements were 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of natural science or physical science, that one additional year bucket we talked about, social science, 2 years of that, and the additional course requirements where you can have your religion, philosophy, foreign language, and so forth, right? So that's the goal. And we know, based on how well we do in school, and we're going to put it out there that we're going to do well, there's four outcomes, right? There's four outcomes for you as a student athlete in this alternative standard universe that we're in now for eligibility, right? One is an early academic qualifier. We'll talk about what that is. A full qualifier, which is meeting the requirements over 4 years, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Academic red shirt, and then finally the non-qualifier, right? So what I want to do now is pop back over to this NCAA.org website that we talked about, right? That's the governing body, again, that will certify you to compete, practice, and receive aid at the collegiate level, right? So if you go in under student athlete, this is on that homepage, ncaa.org, right? I want to back up a little bit. You click, I want to play college sports. We're going to scroll down here. Play Division One sports. Let's click on that. Right. Eligibility Center. We talked about how to register there. Get yourself going. Let's pick NCAA core courses. Find your high school list of NCAA core courses. Let's click on that. All right. So here's the portal where no matter where you are in the country, you can search and see what classes your school offers to meet those requirements. Right? They load those classes up at the school. That's the same information that your counselor or coach will share with you at school. But you can also look here too when you're planning your classes, right? If say I want to take Algebra 2, for instance, right? We know that meets um, one of the math requirements. So let's just pick state, say Colorado, right? Denver. I don't know any high school names in Denver. Actually, let's back up. Pick Cali, California. I know that. And let's pick Inglewood. Morningside High School, right? We know that. All right, so let's pick that. Pops up, Morningside High School, Inglewood, California. Let's check that box, and here we go. All right. Now this account status, that's like some school stuff. So, we don't really concern ourselves with that. All right, you go down, Here's the NCAA high school code. That's all kind of business. That CEB code. That's like another code that colleges use. Address, all those details, phone numbers, things like that, right? So if you go down, you keep scrolling down, and here, right in this section here, that's if you want to just drill in on a specific area, right? But let's go down to the list. As you see, approved courses. You got a bucket for English, a bucket for social science, and a bucket for math, and a bucket for your natural sciences, physical science, right? And down here you have the additional courses, your comparative religion, language, world language, things like that, right? So if you go back up and you say, okay, you know what, I want to start planning my math path for high school, and we know Algebra 1 is that first one. You say, okay, I want to take Algebra 1 my freshman year. If you're a student at Morningside High School in Inglewood, California, you want to take Algebra 1, you're good, right? And how do we know that? We look right here on this list, Algebra 1, it's there, right? And say the next year, you may want to take geometry, it's right there, you're good. Maybe the next year, Algebra 2, it's right there. And if you're feeling real aggressive, right, you want to do another level, calculus. So there's 4 years right there. And we know those classes are good. And if you really like math, you can do more, right? You look back up at the social sciences, say, I want to take government at Morningside High School, you're good. It's right there. U.S. history, you're good, right? World history, you're good. So that's an example of how you can check your courses against what you want to take and what you need to take, right? So that's a resource I think you should get comfortable using. Again, we want to be out here early as possible, be aggressive, be in front of that, right? So that's how you confirm and check your courses, right? So I'm gonna go back over to my list here. And again, our goal is to be a D1 qualifier, right? No ACT scores, no SAT scores needed for qualification. Now, there are certain scholarships outside of athletics that may say, hey, we want to see a score. So it depends on what you're doing. And if you want to take that, you still can take that, that course. Take a prep course, study for it, take it. Right? Some schools, like we mentioned before, you will come off as being more academically competitive if you have that. But that's a school decision and that's a personal decision. But for scholarship eligibility purposes, they're not going to ask you for that. So it's really about what you want to do, right? So that Division 1 qualifier status, what does it allow us to do? And that's our goal. You can get that scholarship, right? Receive athletic aid. You can practice with your team and you can compete in games, right? So that's the goal. Now, that's over 4 years of preparation, right? You want to prepare as a freshman, as a sophomore, as a junior, as a senior. You get all that information, you're good to go, right? So if you're, so inclined and you want to qualify early, an academic qualifier, early qualifier, and that's when you want to say play spring ball in football and you want to get there that second semester of your senior year, you want to graduate after one semester, you can do that, right? That's called an early academic qualifier. And you need to complete 14 of those core course units in your first 3 years. So it's not hard to do, it just requires some planning, right? Because you're going to get certified in that area earlier rather than later so you can leave school earlier, right? Some kids do that, like they'll leave early, they're on college campus that second semester, of which they would have been a senior, and they're ready to go. And some come back and then you go to prom and do all that kind of stuff they want to. But they want to get on the campus early and compete, right? Early. So you can do that. But there's a little bit different timing to get these things done. And you have to have the GPA to support that, right? Which means in this case, you got to have a 3.0, which is, doable. But, it takes a little bit of work. Right? So to back up a little bit, that D1 qualifier status where you get the scholarship, the practice ability, and the competition clearance is what most of us do, right? And there's a progression for that, and that timeline progression basically just ensures that you're on track, right? You want to be on track to graduate, right? You don't want to try to squeeze it all in on the back end and put yourself under some undue pressure, right? So if you're going to do D1 qualification, eligibility wise, you'd have 10 of those 16 courses, right? 10 of those 16 courses before you start your seventh semester, which is your first semester of your senior year, right? And 7 of those courses have to be in math, science, or um, physical sciences, that category, right? So we can do it, but just stay on your timeline for that, right? So we have the early academic qualification. We have the traditional route, D1 qualification. And then that third one is basically an academic red shirt. What is an academic red shirt? That means you complete the 16 courses, you're good to go, right? You got all those courses, but you fell a little short on the GPA side. So if you're above a 2.0 but below a 2.3 and have those courses, you're going to have to red shirt academically. Right? This is not a football red shirt. That's not a football decision. This is an academic decision. And what does that mean? That means you can get a scholarship, you can practice, but you can't play. Right? So, it's not the end of the world, but you definitely don't want to put yourself in that position if you don't have to. Right? So you want to try to be a full qualifier if you can, um, and avoid that scenario. Right? And fourthly, that's the non-qualifier status. Right? So when you non-qualify, basically you can't get a scholarship, you can't practice, you can't compete. Right? So that's like the bottom. It happens, but we want to um, try to avoid that if we can. Right? And again, the standardized test we talked about, the ACT, SAT, for football eligibility purposes, you don't need that. For some independent scholarships or a school, if you're not a scholarship athlete and you're trying to be academically competitive, you may want to take it. Right. So that's a personal decision. Right. So this timeline, I'm going to click on that. So you see it. Let me scroll back up to the top. We talked about this before in the part 1. Right. Here's the classes. Right. Here's that D1 bucket we talked about. English, math, natural, physical science, additional bucket. The social science 2-year bucket right here. And this last additional course bucket of 4 years. So some of these classes will cover across the spectrum. And that's a conversation you can work with your counselor on just to make sure you got your stuff in the right spot. Right. We talked about the 9, 10, 11, 12th grade plan. Here's a visual representation of that. The 4 by 4 equals 16 for classes each year, and that'll track you. So from a timeline perspective, again, you want to have 10 of these courses, 7 of which in this first 3 buckets, right? Going back up. So I'm going to show you again. 7 of which has to be here: English, math, natural, physical science, to keep you on your timeline. And then you're going to get the rest of that 16 course requirement before you graduate. Right. So and you got 4 years for that. So you got to graduate on time. You have to be kind of, where you need to be. And some people do that in a variety of ways. But if you find yourself behind schedule at any point in time, communication is key. Planning is key. Talk to your coach if he or she is the point person on that, and talk to your counselor, of course, and your parents to make sure that you kind of get back on path. So I'm gonna scroll back up here, get back to the top. I'm gonna back out. You scroll over to the right. I want to show you guys a little tool that I use. Okay. Right here is a document that's put out by the University of California school system. And in that system, you have UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, UC Riverside. It's a few of those, right? So they put this out every year, and I think it's a good tool to write down your classes. Now, they refer to their thing as an A through G course requirement. And it's similar to what the NCAA does from their eligibility standpoint. It's just different in terms of what they want you to be as a minimum qualifier to be considered for admission in the UC school system, right? So, go back to the top. The reason I bring this up is that they kind of break down the steps, right? So they say know the admission requirements. For us, for the purpose of this conversation, it's know the eligibility requirements. Same thing, right? 2, understand the admission index and CSU eligibility index, which is basically the same thing. Like, how do the grades and the classes work for me to be able to get into this school? Our situation is, how do the grades and the classes work to be eligible to compete at an NCAA Division I school, right? 3rd, create a plan. We talked about that. Like, we're going to create a plan to track ourselves, to make sure we're good. We want to start this as a freshman in high school. If you weren't on this for some reason earlier on in your high school career, just kind of lay out what you have, pull your transcripts, talk to your counselor, and see what you've taken, because I'm sure you've taken some things that you need and that are good. Lay it out, and then start looking at it more attentively moving forward, right? So create your 4-year plan and adjust your plan each year, which basically means monitor your progress. So if you have to drop a class, or you didn't do well for some reason and you need to retake that class, you have to, stay on top of that to make sure you're still on track for what you need, right? You have to have core courses, which are courses taught by certified instructors, college prep at the grade or above level. So those are all things we need to make sure that the courses are good. And of course, you're going to look back in that system on ncaa.org and see for yourself, right? If you want to see it for yourself, that those classes are good, right? So you can kind of check that for yourself, right? So here's, again, the UC systems, kind of, they break out what the recommended courses are, the minimum requirements, and so forth. But the reason I'm showing you this is that I like this worksheet that they have, right? So one of the things they had, for instance, like history, social science, they want 2 years, right? But the reason I brought this up is because, see to the right where they say core courses for the year, core 9th grade. If you print this out, and this is on the UC website, and I may put the link in the body of the presentation, you can use this to write on, right? So you can put the courses you're taking for NCAA eligibility. Now, this is just a working sheet that you're going to use, so you don't have to recreate the wheel somewhere else. You can write them down here, right? And you can put your grade here for the first semester and your grade for the second semester. So when you get ready to load these grades up into the Eligibility Center portal that you're going to register for, that we talked about, right? Your mom, your dad, loved one, family member, whomever, When you register, you're going to pop these grades in there. And those grades are going to be confirmed by your transcripts when the school send those in. So we're good. That's the 9th grade. Same thing here. 10th, 11th grade. Look below right here. Courses for the year. You can write them in this little section. Write them down. So you know exactly what you're taking. Something changes, you can cross it out. Write in what else you got. Scores, if you're going to do that. And of course, your final year, your 12th grade year, same thing. Right? Courses for the year. So always monitor your progress no matter what you're doing. That's a good tool and it's a good practice no matter where you are and what's happening, right? So again, to recap that, we're talking early qualifier status. That has to be done within your first 3 years if you want to get out of there early and get to college and get going. Traditional route, which you can do over 4 years. Your redshirt route, if you hit some sort of snag. And of course, your academic non-qualification if somehow, things fall out a little bit, right? So keep that in mind when you're planning your classes. Continue to work hard on that. Stay focused. Be prepared to make adjustments. Understand things happen, and then you'll be fine, right? So some of these other things, if we have a problem and so forth, I'm going to save that for another presentation. But thank you guys for joining us, and this wraps up our D1 academic eligibility qualification requirements for this session. All right, thank you. You guys have a good one. Bye.